This is the second part in a series of videos on the equations reducible to quadratic form, all right? So we talked a little bit about how we can solve quadratic equations, but sometimes we have equations that are not really quadratic, but they look like it, but they're in a different form. So we can use this U substitution to make them into quadratic equations. In the last video, we did some U substitution. We decided what a good value for U would be, and we changed equations into things that looked like quadratics. Something that didn't look like a quadratic to start, we changed it into something that is quadratic. So now we can use methods we know how to use to solve those. So let's now use all these substitutions to solve these equations. So here we have some equations, same equations we saw in the last video, and so we're going to steal some U substitution that we already talked through, and we're going to use it to solve these. We decided to let U equal x squared for this because that's this middle variable term, and when we substitute, we get U squared minus 5U plus 6 equals 0, and that's a fairly easy equation to solve because it's factorable. We just have U minus 3 times U minus 2 equals 0. And according to our zero product rule, either U minus 3 is 0 or U minus 2 is 0. And solving these, we get U equals 3 or U equals 2. Now, we don't want to stop there because we weren't trying to solve for U, we're trying to solve for x. So we're going to put the x squared back in for the U, and we get x squared equals 3. Or x squared equals 2. And we can solve these equations with simple methods. In this case, we're going to square root, and we know x is plus or minus square root of 3. And here we square root, and we get x equals plus or minus the square root of 2. We can't solve that at all, so we get some solutions: the square root of 3, the negative square root of 3, square root of 2, and the negative square root of 2. Those are our 4 solutions, which works good because it's a 4th degree and we expect to have it up to 4 solutions. All right, how about this next one? Well, we already said before this is in quadratic form because we have something squared plus something, but that something's some parentheses. So we'll use our substitution here, letting U equal x squared minus 3, that parentheses, we're going to substitute. And so we get U squared plus U minus 5 equals 0. So we have, I think we can factor this. Can we? No, actually, wait a minute, we can't factor it. So, all right, we're going to have to find a different method. If we look for numbers that add to 1 and multiply to negative 5, they don't exist. So let's use some quadratic formula here. And so we have x, well, actually, it's going to be U, right? We haven't solved for x yet, so this is going to be U. So U equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over, let's try that again, all over 2a. And so that's negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1. This is going to be plus 20 all over 2. Okay, so there's our u. Okay. Now, to solve this, we're going to have to plug in what u is equal to, okay? And so we're going to get u is equal to x squared minus 3, and we don't need that there. And we have that equals negative 1. I'm going to leave it as plus or minus for the moment, for sake of room. I'm kind of running out of room here. And so now we're going to add 3 to both sides, okay? So we're going to add 3, and we're going to add 3. We're going to have to think of that as 6 halves, because we've got a denominator of halves. So we're going to have x squared equals, and adding 6 halves to both sides, we get 5 halves. 5, so this 6 here, we think of this as 6 halves. 6 halves minus the 1, we'll combine it with that. That's 5 plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 2. Can't simplify the square root of 21 there. And so now let's finish it off with a big square root. And we get a big crazy answer. and we get x equals plus or minus the square root of 5 plus or minus the square root of 21 all over 2. Not much we can do about that. It's just plain ugly. But there's a bunch of answers. We could write them out. We'd have 1 with a plus and a plus, 1 with a plus outside and a minus, 1 with a minus and a plus, and a minus and a minus. So there's really 4 answers going on there. Looking at a couple more here, we're going to use our same u substitution that we talked about in the last video. We're going to have x to the 1/2, because that's square root of x is like x to the 1/2 here. And so that gives us u squared minus 8u minus 9 equals 0. Well, this one factors nicely. We don't need crazy quadratic formula going on here. And so we've got u equals 9 or u equals -1. Well, what is u? It's x to the 1/2. And so x to the 1/2 is -1. Now we've got to square both sides. So to solve these, we're going to square them. And so x equals 81, or squaring this, x equals 1. Don't forget those parentheses. So we got these 2 answers. Now we got to watch out, because this is a radical equation. We got to see if this really works. So if we plug these in, we get 81 plus 8 times the square root of 81 minus 9. Is that equal to 0? Well, this is 81 plus 8 times 9 minus 9. And we find out that, whoa, wait a minute, that is not going to be equal to, sorry, this 81 ended up with a plus. So, okay, so this is not equal to 0. We got to throw that answer out. Now, if we try for 1 here, let's see if that works. 1 plus 8 to the square root of 1 times square root of 1 minus 9. And that does equal 0, because this is 9 minus 9. That works. That checks out. All right, last one here to substitute. We're going to let u equal m to the -1. And so this is 2u squared minus 5u minus 12 equals 0. Now we've got to do some careful factoring here. We can use our AC method. AC is 2 times -12, which is -24. So we have 2u squared. We need to take that middle term and break it up into 2 things that add to -5 and multiply to -24. I'm thinking that -8 and +3 work nicely for that. And so now we're going to factor this by grouping. And so we pull out the 2u, leaving us with u minus 4. Here, pull out 3, leaving us with u minus 4. And this factors into 2u plus 3 and u minus 4. And then solve these, set them both equal to 0. And we get u equals 4. And we get here u equals, it's going to be -3/2. Finally, let's substitute it back in. U is equal to m to the -1. M to the -1 equals -3/2. And, well, okay, so this m to the -1, it means 1 over m. So let's write it that way, 1 over m. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cross multiply. -3m equals 2, because it's a proportion. And so m equals -2/3 when you multiply or divide there. Here, 1 over m equals 4. So cross multiply, 1 equals 4m, and divide. M is going to be equal to 1/4. And there's our answers. Kind of different with the m to the -1, but that's how we do it, all right? So we pick what the substitution will be. We substitute, solve for u, resubstitute, and get our answer for the original variable. And that is how you solve equations in quadratic form.